Wow, that was better than I expected. I've been to so many of these conferences. I've been, I think, to all of them. Maybe I missed one. I've always been there, but that's awesome. So thank you very much. So a couple of quick notes. One, there's a possible audience participation option here. Is there anybody here that is Australian or Australian adjacent accent?
English.
English might work. If we don't have anybody closer. No one closer? Okay, English is going to win. So in about 10 minutes, can we get a microphone up to him? Are you willing to read something for me?
I'll come down there.
No, you can stay up there. It's going to be up. It's going to be right here, so you're going to be able to read it. It's going to be great. All right, so whoever's got a microphone, in a few minutes, get that up there. Thank you. Number 2, here's a warning. So as you know, we're going to talk about death, and death of humans. And at one point, we're going to talk about Speedos. So if any of those things cause you trouble, and they might, it could come up, there was a box of Kleenex right back there that I put, if in case you want to cry. You can leave, that's okay. And if it brings up something and you need a hug, wait until after the program, and I'll be happy to give you a hug. So that's our warning. There you go. And I'm going to start with a story. So I woke up at 7 a.m., and I jumped on AOL Instant Messenger. Anybody remember AOL Instant Messenger? This is the age of this story. Names have been changed. And one of my staff members says, David 73 is dead. Now, David 73 was our third most popular member of our community. He was always answering questions. He was a super nice guy. And he's the one that called me when I got cranky one day with one of our VIPs. He's like, man, you need to calm down. And it was so stunning that he was dead. And we didn't really know what to do. So we huddled, and we figured out that we needed to put up a banner saying, David 73 was awesome. We put a message where people could share their feelings. And after 2 days, we locked that, we printed it, and we mailed it to his son. And it was really hard because at 20, I hadn't dealt with this. It was 25. I hadn't dealt with this. I was lucky I had a team that we could work together. But this was a huge community. And at the time, it was one of the largest communities on the internet. And so I wanted to talk about this today because many of us don't know how to deal with this and aren't ready for it. But before we do that, let's talk about this, growth. How many of you here are not focused on growth in your community? Okay, we got a couple. I'm surprised. Cool. I want to talk to you later, figure out why you're here. Because there are 17 talks at this very conference that mention growth in their title or their abstract. And growth is very important. We have to talk about growth. Measure your growth, whatever you need to do. Go to one of the talks. There's 17 of them. But we have to remember that there's a life cycle. There's growth, there's decline, and there's death. And so what do? We have rituals. Rituals are incredibly important. And the thing is, most countries, most cultures have rituals around death. They're honed over many generations of people dying. As Savannah said, people die. You're going to die. All of you are going to die, just to let you know, in case you were wondering. And people die, and we have these rituals because it's important and because we need to process our grief, whether it's from people dying or even grief from losing the lottery. There's a Scientific American study if you want to read about it. I don't have a link for it, but I can put it on Twitter later. But it talks about this grief process and why it's important. So you need to maybe come up with a ritual for death in your community. And the best time to do this is right now, when you're not dealing with that grief of the passing of somebody maybe you care about. Maybe it's number 3, maybe it's number 10, maybe it's somebody else, but you may get personally hit with this, and it's really hard to come up with these rituals when you're feeling that grief. So I've got some questions. There's no right answers. There's no test because it's important to your community. It's not what my opinion is. So here's question number 1. What happens if someone in your community dies? What if it's a VIP? What if it's just a newbie that's been there 2 or 3 weeks and you find out that they've passed, but they're like, everybody loves them already? Does it matter? Does it change how you're going to react to this? How do you verify this? So my story's old enough where hacking wasn't really a big thing, doxing wasn't a big thing, but it's kind of an issue now. And so what do you do to verify? Do you need to verify? And some of you won't, but some of you may need documentation depending on what your community is. Can you acknowledge this person's contributions to your community? Do you have the power? Do you have the authority to do this? And there are legal issues potentially with this, with GDPR. And so you may have to think about what this looks like for you. I was able to do it. I had all the power. I was the administrator, so I was able to put up that banner. I was able to create a thread. But do you have to call somebody in your organization to create a banner? Do you have to get technical support? Whatever that looks like, maybe you need to have that ready. Where will you acknowledge them? Again, this is what we were talking about, a banner or a thread, whatever your community looks like, pictures maybe, Pinterest. There's a lot of different opportunities here. And then where will your members express their grief? That if you don't give them a place, they're going to acknowledge that all over the community. And it's nice to have it all in one place where everybody can share. It's like a funeral. People go to a funeral so they can share in that grief. And in a very clinical, operational way, how are you going to modify their account? Are you going to turn off their ability to post so their ghost can't post, or that somebody hack in? I mean, it happened to Twitter the other day. He's not dead, but still problems. Yeah, thank you. Can you mark their account deceased or inactive? There's a way to do that on Facebook. It took them forever because they're all 25 and don't deal with death, but maybe you need to figure out how to do this. And if they have moderator access, how are you going to turn that off? Do you have, again, the authority and the power to do that? And then this gets into some of the feelings. So if you have paid staff, what can you do for them? Do they need grief counselors? Do they need a couple of days off? I gave a couple of my staff members that were really close to David 2 days off to go and kind of just feel and grieve and not have to deal with the day-to-day. The needs of a volunteer staff. So if you've got volunteer staff, you may not be able to give them grief counseling, but if you have the authority, if you have the budget, maybe that's something you can offer. This is especially true if you're running these offline events where maybe there's 2 or 3 volunteers that are running these events. How do you give them support in that grieving process? And then this is the one we all forget. Your needs. You may be grieving. What do you need? Can you get grief counseling? Don't suffer alone. Go get counseling if you need it. And then this is contact lists, and this is kind of a vague one, but do you have somebody you need to contact in your organization? If they're a VIP in your community, there's probably a VIP somewhere else in the organization. Maybe they're a big sales opportunity. Maybe they're one of your admins. Go ahead and know who you need to contact to tell that somebody has passed in your community. And this is the difficult one, and this is the one I'm going to say don't do for the most of you, but can you acknowledge their belief systems? And this is mostly about your feelings on this. If you are a monotheistic believer and this community member is a pantheistic believer, are you comfortable with supporting that? Now, this can get appropriative and this can get all kinds of wrong, so avoid this if you can, but there are some communities where everybody has the same belief systems and maybe you can figure out a way to incorporate that. So those are the questions. Go back to your businesses or your community teams and maybe go through this. And now you have these procedures and where are you going to put them? And so there was a talk, there's a lady from Slack that gave a talk the other day. I can't remember her name now off the top of my head, but it was really great. I'm going to kind of go through this a little quick. But a run book is a compilation of routine procedures and operations. This is from computer operation centers. And it doesn't have to be called a run book. It can be called a wiki or wherever it is. But you need to keep it updated. And you need to put things like moderation rules, moderation processes. But more importantly are these things that don't happen very often. Things like death, things like abuse, those kinds of things. There was a talk about crisis a couple of talks ago. Like all of these things need to be in here because this is where you need to go to find out what happens and what to do. And the thing that needs to be in here that's not on this list is your death. And this doesn't have to be your death, right? It can be I was hit by a car while riding on a bicycle. And this actually happened to one of my team members. He was riding along. He had a helmet on. Wear your helmets because the helmet saved his life. But he got hit by a car. He was in a hospital for 3 weeks. And it's amazing how much he knew that we did not. And we had to figure that out. So figure out, put the run book in the run book, the stuff about you if you are the main community manager. So yeah, run books again. But things that you can't put in your run book are passwords. Don't put passwords in your run book, bad idea. So have a password manager. If you have a shared passwords, most of the time you should not do this. Have your own accounts, but the world is not perfect. So get a password manager. If you need a suggestion, come back, find me. A shared address book with all these addresses we were talking about. This is a good idea to have. And this is especially true for a team of one. You may think you don't need it, but if your computer falls in the toilet, happened to a friend of mine. I don't know why he had the computer by the toilet, but it fell in the toilet. And all of his passwords were gone, and he had to reset everything. And so if he had a shared password manager where he could go log in and get those passwords again, it would have been really helpful. Now we're going to move into the big one, closing a community. So we've talked about death of a member. We've talked about your death or injury. Now we're going to talk about death of a community because this one's hard, right? And I'm going to just tell you, it's going to be okay. It's going to hurt because probably if you're closing a community, your job is going to be impacted and you're going to be feeling this. And so this is why we plan for these things ahead of time. So you're not like trying to find a job and like, what am I going to do and how am I going to get paid? So figure this stuff out now. And I'm going to give you, again, some questions. No wrong answers. So can you announce early? Or are they just going to shut it off one day? Now, this could be your company ran out of money and boom, you're gone. And that's okay. But if you can announce it early and allow people to grieve, again, we're talking about grief. Can you facilitate connections between the users? Is there a place for them to go? Can you suggest other places to connect? Can they download their content? Now, again, we're talking about GDPR, and there are other rules. The California rules are maybe going to include some of this. So can they download their own content so that when it goes away? So use words like GDPR, and you'll get some. Your legal team would be like, what do you need? And removing access. So again, if you've got public volunteers, how are you removing their access? Obviously, if you're shutting down the community, maybe that's not a big issue, but maybe they have a VPN access to connect to the community. Do you need to turn that off? And then how are you going to thank your moderators? So many of us have volunteer moderators. How are you going to thank them? How are you going to acknowledge them? Again, if your job is on the line, this is going to be really hard, but it's incredibly important. And then you take all those questions and guess where you're going to put them? The run book again. You're going to see this. I think this is the last time you see it. But it's incredible. This is the thing. You have to have these things written down. So, to review. Are you ready up there? You got the microphone? Okay, can we turn on that microphone up there? Okay, so why we do this, and this is why.
I have two memories of my dad. At the beach, cooking shrimp on the barbie mate in his Speedos. Hunched over the computer, answering questions here.
Thank you. So he spent 364 of 365 days 1 year answering questions. He spent more time in my community than I did. And he was so nice, and his son had these beautiful memories of his father. I had beautiful memories of him. And this is why we need to grieve these situations. So, we talked about rituals. Rituals are important. That's why we're here. We need to do these rituals to make these things happen. Put it all in a run book. Okay, so I lied. It's one more. Sorry. Ask all those questions. These slides will be available, or I can put it up on Twitter, or there's somebody maybe taking notes in the shared Gmail or Google Doc. And have a plan for yourself going away suddenly. And you know, this could be the greatest job ever. I read about a job the other day that you can smell a dog breath. Like, this is a job, to smell dog's breath to find out whether. So maybe this is your dream job. I can't imagine. And you get the opportunity to just take that and go. So somebody has to cover for you while you go smell dogs. And then you got closing the community. So think through what you're going to do when you're closing the community. So that's basically it. I have one more slide. I am not a Buddhist, but I found this while I was planning this. And life is a journey. Death is a return to earth. The universe is like an inn. The passing years are like dust. Regard this phantom world as a start at dawn, a bubble in the stream, a flash of lightning in the summer cloud, and a flickering lamp, a phantom and a dream. Thank you.